Virginia 1894, two girls, identical, perfectly still in a black and white photograph. Their eyes, unsettlingly clear, don't reflect the world around them. The photograph is all that remains, the rest is missing. The official file, the Culpeper Orphanage case, was once 127 pages long. Today, only 6 survive, the rest ripped out, burned, or locked away. What was erased was not simply evidence of a disappearance, but the memory of 2 children who should never have been born. The Culpeper Twins, local archives list them as Mary and Eliza, abandoned in 1886, but other records dispute their names, their origins, even their existence. Some townsfolk swore they were never children at all, but something wearing the appearance of children. What is certain is this: on November 2, 1894, the orphanage bell rang at midnight, not for supper, not for prayer, for evacuation. When authorities entered the Culpeper Orphanage, they found the building in flames. Dozens of children were missing, 6 bodies were recovered, none belonging to the twins. Witnesses who survived described singing, a chorus of voices speaking a language no one recognized. Some said it was the twins who led it. Others swore they saw the girls guiding children out of the building hand in hand, not to safety, but into the woods, into the dark, into something that has never been explained. The U.S. government classified the event as a fire accident. But the sealed file suggests otherwise: a hidden ritual, an institution in crisis, and an orphanage that became a stage for something older than America itself. This is the story of the Culpeper Twins and the secret America tried to erase. Culpeper, Virginia was not an ordinary town in the 19th century. Nestled between farmlands and forests that refused to be tamed, the town was already heavy with unspoken histories. Residents whispered of burial grounds hidden beneath cornfields, of unmarked graves from the Civil War, and of a church that changed its name 3 times to distance itself from the scandal of misplaced parish records. When the twins appeared at the orphanage gates in 1886, no one asked questions. Found wrapped in identical cloth, no birth certificates, no family, they were placed in the care of Sister Agnes, a woman whose stern faith often disguised a trembling doubt. The townsfolk muttered. They said the children never cried, never laughed, only stared. Their voices, when they did speak, were too practiced, repeating entire sentences back with eerie precision, as though they were remembering, not learning. By 1890, Culpeper had developed a strange reputation. Children in town began sleepwalking into the woods at night, some returning scratched and shivering, others never returning at all. Families moved away quietly, abandoning homes rather than explaining why their children woke screaming, swearing they heard 2 girls calling their names. The orphanage kept no record of these incidents. Yet in the sealed file, one phrase was scribbled over and over again in the margins: the town cannot survive if the twins remain. St. Mary's Orphanage overlooked the town like a watchtower. Built in 1842, it was a stern, brick institution surrounded by fences too high for children to climb. Yet its windows were forever cracked open to the sounds of whispers carried in the night wind. Inside, the halls were ruled by silence. Children ate in silence, slept in silence, prayed in silence, but silence was not peace. It was fear. The Culpeper Twins thrived in it. Teachers noted their uncanny coordination. If one lifted her hand, the other did the same. If one was punished, the other wept. They never sat apart, never played with others, and never allowed themselves to be separated. By the early 1890s, younger children at the orphanage began drawing strange symbols. When questioned, they said, "Mary and Eliza showed us." These crude carvings, etched into desks and bed frames, bore resemblance to ancient glyphs. Not English, not Latin, but older, resembling scripts from Mesopotamian tablets unearthed decades later. At night, the twins sang lullabies no adult recognized, songs that soothed the other children into sleep so deep they could not be woken until morning. When Sister Agnes confronted the girls about their songs, they simply smiled. "We didn't write them," Mary said. "They wrote us." November 2, 1894, the night every Culpeper record attempts to erase. The first report was smoke rising from the orphanage roof around 11:45 p.m. By midnight, the great bell tolled, not rung by hand, but struck over and over as though in frenzy. Townspeople rushed uphill only to hear singing carrying across the fields. Survivors later described it as layered voices, dozens of children speaking in one tongue. The language was rhythmic, sharp, unnerving, echoing through the brick halls like a summons. The fire spread with unnatural speed. Witnesses swore the flames moved against the wind as though chasing the children who fled the building. Some said they saw the twins walking calmly through the chaos, leading children out, not to the safety of the road but into the forest. One surviving nun claimed she tried to stop them. She grabbed Eliza's arm and felt, not flesh, but something rigid like carved stone. The child turned and whispered in her ear words that made her collapse, bleeding from the nose, unable to stand. She lived only long enough to write one sentence before dying of seizure 2 days later. "They are not two." When the fire was contained, 6 charred bodies were recovered. None were the twins. Most of the orphanage children were gone. Authorities claimed they had perished in the fire. Locals knew better. They had followed the twins. Weeks later, investigators compiled the Culpeper file. It included witness testimony, sketches of the strange symbols found inside the orphanage, and a report describing an unknown language. Sung by children in unison, but the file did not remain intact. By 1911, most of its pages had been destroyed under orders from higher offices, never publicly named. What remains is fragmented. Page 7 describes a child found wandering barefoot 10 miles from the orphanage. He claimed the twins led him to a clearing where the ground opened like a mouth. He was returned to the orphanage but died within days, skin covered in marks resembling burns, though no fire had touched him. Page 19 references a letter from Sister Agnes, written days before the fire. "The twins must not be confirmed in the church. They belong not to Christ, nor to mankind. They are of another order, one older than Scripture, and they hunger for children as vessels." The last surviving page, heavily redacted, lists the official conclusion: accidental fire, structural collapse, all children deceased. Yet scribbled in faint pencil beneath the typed report is one final line, a voice from someone who did not believe the lie. "Search the woods. You will not find bodies. You will find only songs." In the weeks after the fire, not all the missing were gone forever. A handful of children stumbled back into Culpeper, but they were changed. One boy, Thomas Avery, returned after 3 days, walking barefoot into town, his eyes swollen as if from crying. But he would not speak. Doctors examined him and found his tongue scarred as though carved by a sharp instrument. He never spoke again, only hummed the same strange lullabies the twins were known to sing. Another, a girl named Clara, appeared on a farmhouse porch 30 miles north. She was wrapped in a shawl that did not belong to her. When pressed about where she had been, she whispered, "The twins said we must go where mothers cannot find us." She died in her sleep that same night, her face contorted in terror. Families who took these children in reported waking to find them standing at their bedsides, staring, humming, waiting for some signal. None of them lived more than a few months after their return. The local coroner wrote a confidential note that was later confiscated by federal authorities. "Their bodies are here, but their souls were taken. They are no longer children." In 1895, strangers came to Culpeper. Men in dark coats, traveling in pairs, who spoke little and wrote much. They were not from the county, nor even the state. Their papers bore seals most townsfolk had never seen before. They questioned survivors, confiscated diaries, and removed artifacts from the ruins of the orphanage. Among the items seized, fragments of children's drawings that depicted circles, spirals, and shapes that mirrored the strange glyphs etched on ancient stones overseas. The townspeople quickly understood this was no longer a local matter. The tragedy of the orphanage had become a federal secret. Rumors spread that the twins were sighted far from Culpeper, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, even in Washington itself. Yet each time, no evidence remained. Witnesses were silenced or discredited. By summer, the government declared the case closed, but beneath the official closure was an undercurrent of dread. Local law enforcement were ordered never to reopen the matter. Families were instructed to forget the children who vanished, and anyone who questioned too loudly soon found themselves facing charges unrelated to the fire: trespassing, disorderly conduct, tax fraud, anything to silence their curiosity. The orphanage grounds were left abandoned. fenced and marked with a single warning sign, "Keep out, federal property." For a time, Culpeper fell silent, but the silence did not last. Between 1896 and 1903, disappearances of children increased across Virginia. They were never numerous enough to make headlines, but always strange enough to unsettle the families left behind. One case in Fredericksburg described a boy who vanished from his bed, only for his sister to wake hours later singing a lullaby she swore he had taught her in a dream. In Charlottesville, a farmer reported seeing two pale girls standing in his field at dawn, leading 3 children by the hand into the mist. The children were never found. Newspapers treated these incidents as isolated. Yet in Culpeper, whispers grew louder. The twins were not gone, they were moving. Some claimed the girls aged slower than natural, that sightings decades apart described them still as children. Unchanged, unaged, unearthly. Others suggested they were no longer physical at all, but voices carried on the wind, finding vessels among the living. A letter discovered in the archives of St. Paul's Church, dated 1901, hints at the scale of fear. It is not the devil. The devil seeks to tempt. These ones seek to claim. They are not fallen angels nor risen demons, but something older than both. In 1908, the orphanage grounds were quietly excavated by federal agents. Locals watched from afar as crates were loaded onto trains bound for Washington. What they uncovered was never disclosed publicly, but fragments of testimony from a dismissed worker later surfaced. Beneath the ruins, he said, there was a chamber, a stone room sealed beneath the orphanage since its construction. Within it, etched into the walls, were the same glyphs the children had been drawing years before. He claimed the chamber contained not furniture nor religious artifacts, but rows of small stone cradles, empty yet smoothed by use. The implication was horrifying. The orphanage had been built atop something ancient, something not Christian, something not American, but far older. When asked what became of the chamber, the worker only replied, "They buried it again, and they buried the truth with it." The worker disappeared weeks later. His family swore he was taken in the night, though no record of his arrest exists. From that day, the town of Culpeper ceased to speak of the orphanage entirely. But silence is not forgetfulness. It is fear given form. Though the file was buried, some memories refused to die. Mothers who lost children to the fire carried their grief into old age, and with grief came testimony no file could erase. In 1921, the widow Margaret Langley testified privately to a visiting priest. "I heard them outside my window, singing, the twins. 30 years have passed and still their voices have not aged. They call to me in my sleep." Another woman, Elizabeth Moore, who lost her youngest daughter that night, reported finding dolls left on her porch. 2 identical figures carved crudely from wood, with painted eyes that seemed too lifelike. She burned them only to wake the next night to find the dolls returned, unburned, staring from her mantle. These mothers swore the twins were not merely memories. They were a presence that lingered, feeding on grief, appearing wherever mourning was strongest. By the 1930s, many of the surviving families left Virginia entirely, yet letters from across the country suggest the mothers were not safe, even in distance. Wherever they moved, the singing followed. The Culpeper file may have been destroyed, but for those who lived it, the event never ended. In 1932, Reverend Samuel Dyer arrived in Culpeper, tasked with restoring faith, in a town that had lost nearly all of it. By then, the orphanage hill was overgrown, its fence rusted, the sign defaced. Few dared to climb it. Dyer was a reformer. He believed in confronting superstition with scripture, in cleansing fear with holy authority. But within 6 months, he began to change. His sermons, once bold, became fragmented, delivered in whispers, punctuated by long silences. Parishioners recalled a sermon where he read directly from his notes. "Beware the children who walk without shadow. They come in twos. They ask for trust, but they belong to nothing of God, nothing of man. They speak a tongue that wounds the ear, and their hunger is for the young." Days later, he collapsed mid-sermon, bleeding from the ears. His final words, scrawled on the back of his Bible, were chilling. "They are the choir beneath the earth. They never stopped singing." The church quietly reassigned another priest, who refused to ever mention Reverend Dyer again. His warnings became just another silence stitched into Culpeper's fabric. In 1937, documents surfaced suggesting a connection between the Culpeper Twins and a now defunct seminary in Baltimore. The seminary, run by Jesuits, had received multiple correspondences from Sister Agnes of St. Mary's in the years before the fire. Her letters begged for guidance. These girls do not belong to baptism. They speak scripture backwards as if mocking it. They know verses they were never taught, and in dreams they tell other children to follow. The seminary's reply was evasive, offering prayers but no action. But an internal note, preserved in private archives, reveals the truth. If Culpeper has birthed them, Culpeper must contain them. We cannot allow the contagion to spread. Suppression is our only defense. This phrase, the contagion, would reappear decades later in government documents, long after the seminary itself was shuttered. What was feared was not just the twins, but the idea of them, that their presence could multiply, replicate, echo in new generations. The seminary closed in 1941. Its grounds remain sealed, its archives lost in a fire, but some believe the fire was no accident, merely another burial of knowledge too dangerous to survive. In 1944, a young attorney named Robert Finch attempted to reopen the Culpeper case as part of a larger investigation into state negligence at orphanages. He was not a man of faith but of law, and he believed the fire had been covered up to protect the church and the state. Finch interviewed surviving witnesses. He pored over county records trying to reconstruct the missing file, but his notes reveal something disturbing. The deeper he researched, the more he began to dream of the twins himself. His diary, recovered after his disappearance, describes recurring visions. I see them at the foot of my bed. Two girls in soot, stained dresses, they do not blink. They hum, waiting for me to answer a question I cannot hear. Neighbors reported hearing music from Finch's home at night, children's voices rising in chorus, though he lived alone. On April 19, 1945, Finch vanished. His diary was found on his desk, open to a final page. If I stop writing, I will follow them. If you are reading this, I already have. His body was never recovered. Scholars who briefly glimpsed fragments of the Culpeper file noted that the twins' songs and the children's carvings bore resemblance to an ancient tongue. Neither Latin nor Hebrew, but Proto, languages older than written scripture. One linguist, Dr. Harold Griggs of Yale, described it as a pre-Babylonian liturgical tongue unknown to man in this hemisphere. His paper on the subject was rejected by every journal. Months later, Griggs retracted it entirely, claiming his notes had been falsified. But colleagues whispered that his breakdown was real. He was later found wandering barefoot along train tracks in Connecticut, humming a lullaby that matched those recorded at the Culpeper fire. The symbols themselves, spirals, intersecting lines, mirrored figures, appear again and again in suppressed reports. In 1947, they were even noted among children at a Catholic orphanage in Pennsylvania, who carved them into chapel pews before a wave of disappearances struck that institution as well. The same symbols, the same songs, the same twin figures at the edge of every account. It was no longer just Culpeper. By 1950, official mentions of the Culpeper case ceased entirely. The federal file was purged. The church forbade priests from speaking of the orphanage. Surviving families were warned into silence, but silence is not absence. In private diaries, in hushed confessions, the twins lived on. One mother, relocated to Ohio, wrote in 1950, I am old now, but they still come to me in dreams asking where my daughter sleeps. They never grow older. They are always waiting. In Culpeper itself, the hill where the orphanage once stood remained untouched. The town fenced it off, claiming danger of collapse, but children dared each other to climb at night. Many swore they heard laughter carried from the ruins, two voices, always two. And though officials called the file destroyed, fragments continued to surface. A photograph here, a page of testimony there, circulating in whispers and archives. Every fragment pointing to one conclusion, too dreadful to put on record. The Culpeper twins were never lost in the fire. They were freed by it. Those who dared to investigate the forest behind St. Mary's Hill spoke of a presence that had not lifted since 1894. Hunters avoided it. Children never played there. Even animals seemed to shun its shadows. Locals told stories of hearing two voices on the wind, soft, melodic, always calling names. If you heard your name, they said, you must never answer. In 1938, a farmer cutting wood near the orphanage ruins reported seeing a circle of small footprints in the soil, though no children had been in Culpeper for days. He swore he heard singing as he approached, only to find his own daughter standing within the circle, eyes closed, repeating the lullaby of the twins. He pulled her out, carried her home, and locked the doors. The next morning, she was gone. In her bed lay two small wooden dolls, identical, with eyes scratched deep into the wood. The farmer moved his family west, never speaking of Culpeper again. But before he left, he carved 3 words into the orphanage gate: "They are waiting." By mid-century, disappearances resembling Culpeper's tragedy appeared in neighboring states. In Maryland, 4 boys vanished from a Sunday school, leaving behind only drawings of 2 identical figures holding hands. In North Carolina, a group of orphans disappeared after a midnight hymn, their voices blending into a harmony no adult recognized. Each time, witnesses described twin girls at the scene, sometimes pale, sometimes soot-stained, sometimes dressed as though from another century, but always the same. Survivors spoke of dreams that began weeks before, dreams of voices singing from beneath the earth, dreams of being led into corridors lined with stone cradles, dreams of mothers calling out, unable to reach them. The government labeled these disappearances isolated accidents, fires, runaways, mismanagement, but families compared notes. The patterns aligned too closely. It was no longer a story of 2 girls in Culpeper. It was a story of something repeating. Among the fragments of the Culpeper file that survived, one phrase recurs: the choir beneath the earth. Scholars believe this referred not to literal song, but to a phenomenon: children's voices used as vessels for something older. The twins were not singers, but conductors. Through them, an ancient liturgy resurfaced, one that demanded innocence as its instrument. A witness from 1894, Sister Agnes herself, wrote before her death, "They are not 2 children, but one voice split in flesh. They do not sing to us, but through us. We are not the audience, we are the hymn." If true, the Culpeper twins were never simply orphans. They were emissaries, 2 halves of a single entity, using children to complete a chorus older than Scripture. And that chorus did not die in 1894. It spread quietly, patiently, until it no longer needed an orphanage, until it could find new homes, new towns, new voices. By 1950, the pattern was undeniable. Reports across the eastern seaboard hinted at the same phenomenon: twin figures, children disappearing, unearthly songs. The federal government acted, files were purged, witnesses silenced, even parish records were seized. A directive, later uncovered in fragments, ordered one thing above all: this history must not be remembered. The orphanage hill was bulldozed, the ruins buried under soil, the chamber beneath sealed forever. Officially, nothing remained, but families knew better. Mothers still woke to hear lullabies at their windows. Priests still dreamed of sermons spoken in tongues they could not translate. And some who read the fragments of the Culpeper file swore they began to hear faint music at night, as though the very act of remembering had invited it back. The final erasure was not to protect the public from history. It was to protect them from recognition, because recognition is how the song spreads. Tonight, the file remains destroyed. The government denies its existence. The church disowns its records. Culpeper itself has rebuilt over its scars, its children playing in streets unaware of what was buried beneath them. But some truths cannot be sealed. In small towns across America, parents still report children waking in the night, humming melodies they should not know, siblings speaking in unison, identical figures spotted at the edges of playgrounds, their hands locked together, their faces too still. And when those children are asked where they learned their songs, their answers are always the same: Mary and Eliza taught us. The Culpeper twins were not lost, they were not forgotten, they are still singing. And if you hear the song, if you wake to find 2 figures at the foot of your bed, remember this: you are not the audience, you are the hymn.